What's up, folks? John here with another episode of Cocktails and Cloud. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about some recently discovered ransomware that's actually targeting AWS S3. Before we get into that, though, let's talk about our drink. So, what are we drinking in this mug? Family and I recently got back from a trip to Europe, went all over, saw a lot of different Christmas markets. Many of these markets had one thing in common: hot punch. With alcohol, without alcohol, your choice. But to celebrate Dry January, today we're drinking a Kinderpunsch that is a punch made without alcohol. Perfect for the kids, perfect for those of you who aren't typically drinking. It's extremely cold out here this week. We're talking single digits. This morning was like -9 when we woke up. I'm cold. This is the perfect thing to hit the spot. So, as with any punch, you make it to taste, you make it how you want to. For this punch, we took equal parts orange juice, apple juice, mixed a lot of warm spices, cinnamon, clove, Star Anise, added a little bit of honey, added some Hisbiscus tea, and some water. Let that come to a little bit of a boil, bring it down, stir it up, enjoy. Super simple, great drink to have warm. So what's the deal with this S3 ransomware anyways? S3 has a feature known as server-side encryption. One of the subsets of that feature entitles users to encrypt data with their own keys. This is called server-side encryption customer keys, or abbreviated SSE-C. Threat actors discovered that they can utilize this, and they can exploit this similar to a traditional ransomware sense by bringing their own attacker keys and encrypting customer data with the attacker provided keys. Now the premise here is the customer won't be able to access their data without knowledge of that key. And this is where the ransomware scheme comes into play. The customers are being asked or extorted by the ransomware attackers to give them money, give them a few Bitcoin in order to unlock their data. Making use of traditional S3 APIs, threat actors can exploit this. All they need is access. So how do we prevent this? Or more appropriately, how do we limit the blast radius? So first of all, limit the ability of an attacker to gain access to your account to begin with. This sounds so simple, but restricting access to only trusted individuals. Disable and prohibit the use of IAM accounts and utilize things like short-term credentials or SSO to gain access through that or through role assumption. Limit the amount of AWS CLI credentials that are being exposed. This will help prevent attackers from gaining access to your account to begin with. Okay, so that's a bit of a cop-out. Obviously, we don't want attackers in our account. Point number 2 here is exercise principle of least privilege. We know systems are going to have to interact with S3. What do they need to do with S3? Are they just updating data, right? Are they modifying data? They certainly don't need S3 full access, which is an AWS managed principle. So what can we do? Well, limit the access given to these folks in these systems that are using S3. Give them the ability to modify the data they need to access, right? But don't give them more than that. So do an audit of your accounts, your roles, your permissions, and make sure that it's not overly permissive. Implement versioning in your S3 buckets. A little known fact that if you have versioning enabled on the buckets and you enable encryption after the fact, the S3 versioning will keep an unencrypted copy of that data on hand. This certainly, a product feature, can help out in the event that your S3 bucket is compromised. With versioning enabled, you could simply roll back to an unencrypted version. Now, this points back to the previous point. If the threat actor has an account with overly privileged access, they could simply disable S3 versioning. So you need to make sure that your users don't have the ability to toggle versioning on or off. Next thing to think about is monitoring. Monitor AWS CloudTrail. Watch for CloudTrail logs. Set up monitoring. Look specifically for any unusual usage of the copy object API call. Now, AWS has already done some work under the hood. GuardDuty will alert, I believe, of these types of attacks. They've gone the distance to try to prevent these attacks as well. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do our diligence as consumers. Finally, if at all possible, block the use of server-side encryption with customer keys. We can do this utilizing resource control policies. Take a look at one of our previous videos to understand more about those. So if your organization's not making use of server-side encryption with customer keys, we can completely disable that for all of our accounts. Then we know even if an attacker gains access, they won't be able to utilize the encryption to attack it through a ransomware technique. So like everything in security, do what we can to prohibit access and exploitation. But let's be sure we have monitoring in place. That way we know if we're being compromised. Make sure we have the procedures in place that allow us to roll back and gain access to our original data. We mentioned having S3 versioning enabled. The other thing to think about is having offline replications of your S3 buckets. That way, if you are compromised, you always have something you can roll back to. So anyways, I hope you enjoy the Kinderpunsch. I'm going to finish mine while editing this video. If you all have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Always happy to talk about AWS S3 in more detail. Thank you.